Tonight, a special edition of Charlie Rose.
The filmmaker who brought us Unforgiven and last year's Mystic River has outdone himself once again with his new film. The director is Clint Eastwood. The film is $1 Million Baby. It is a story set in the world of female boxing. Here is a look at the trailer. Clint Eastwood not only is the star and the director and the producer, he wrote the score. Critics and fans alike are honoring this film with incredible reviews and praise. For his effort, he has been nominated for several awards, including 2 Golden Globes and a Directors Guild of America. Earlier this week, I sat with Clint Eastwood to talk about this film and his career. Here is that conversation.
Here's what one critic said. More than Unforgiven, more than Mystic River, it is Clint Eastwood's autumnal masterpiece.
Obviously, a very sensitive, intelligent man.
Of great judgment. Of great judgment.
Whoever that critic was. No, that's what I don't know what I'd say to that other than I've got. That's very nice. I don't know whether it is those other 2 pictures that you mentioned are pictures that were. That I thought I did as best I could, but this I thought I did as best I could too.
So your answer is all shucks.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. It's not I have no answer for it. I keep always harping back to the theory that once you finish the picture, it's no longer yours anyway. You put it out. Once you release it, it becomes the eyes of the beholder and whatever they want to think about it.
Why did you want to make it?
Well, I like the story very much. Al Ruddy sent me the book, Rope Burns, about 3.5 to 4 years ago. And I read all 6 stories, and this particular story was the one that he was pointing to, and this is the one that everybody thought had potential. And then I didn't hear from him for a while, and then all of a sudden he came back with a finished script on it, and the script was really good. So I said, yeah, I'll do this.
So then you go see Warner Brothers and say, you're my studio, I know you want to back this.
Well, actually, that didn't quite come out that way, but a group called Lakeshore Entertainment, they were involved with it. They had helped finance the writing of the script, and so they were kind of tied in, but they couldn't afford to do the whole thing. They said they'd do part of it. So I went to Warner Brothers and said, "Would you participate in this?" And that they had looked at the script, but they weren't nuts about it. They were a little afraid of it, and so. I said, well, I'm going to make this as the next picture wherever I do it, if I have to go out and borrow the money myself. So I took off, and a few days later they called up and said, well, we don't want to let you go somewhere else, so why don't you, we'll come in for half of it. We'll split it with Lakeshore Entertainment. So that's the way it came about.
This is not a big budget movie, is it?
Not by today's standards, no. I think somebody told me the other day that the average is $68 or $9 million per picture. So this would be way less than half of that.
Took you how long to shoot it?
37 days.
It's about what?
Well, it's about a lot of things. It's on the surface, it's about a woman who wants to become a boxer, but then below that, it becomes about people with dreams and aspirations that are a real long shot to come through. And it's also about searching for family and regret with prior relationships and forming a relationship, a surrogate father-daughter, a love story. It's a lot of things.
3 principal characters. First is Frankie. You play Frankie. It's a guy who owns a gym. He's a trainer. Why did you play it?
It just was a very appealing. First place, it's it's in my age bracket. It's a subject I knew a little bit about. I didn't know any of these people. I had to sort of we had to sort of go research them. I was on my way to retirement as far as being in front of the camera.
That's why I raised the point, because you had said, unless I see something really terrific that I ought to do, I'm not going to do it.
Sure. Well, on Mystic River, I thought it was very comfortable being behind the camera and watching younger people out there performing, and it was a very satisfying experience. So I thought, well, that'll be the end of that. But this came along, and I said, well, this is a good role. And I don't know whether I was inspired by the enthusiasm all these people had on Mystic River, but I just thought, well, maybe I'll jump back in the fray here. So I did this role, but I figured I'd also direct it. It wasn't a hard picture to do technically, but it wasn't hard for this in the sense that I had Morgan Freeman, who was solid as the rock.
Worked together before.
And we'd worked together once before, and I was always thinking about a project where we could work together again. And then Hilary Swank, who I've always admired but never worked with.
Huge demand on her. Physically?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you knew she could act, but you got to figure out whether.
I knew that, and there was always a question in my mind as to whether she would be able to really put forth for this kind of thing, or any actress. It's a tremendous job, because you have to really dedicate yourself to it. You always hear stories about people training for physical roles, but they go in and they run around the block and say I'm trained up, but we needed to really bulk her up a little bit, give her a little bit more skeletal muscle, and we also needed to train her boxing and teach her about boxing. And she started on a boxing training here in New York City, and then I brought her out west, and she trained a little bit out there, and she started training with a fellow named Grant Roberts, who was a weightlifter, and put her on a diet, and had her do all this lifting, and she put on 18, 19 pounds.
And that left hook could go.
Yeah, and she did, and a fellow named Don Framilton and Don Dinkins were boxing trainers out there, and they taught her how to punch with leverage, and it was great. It's great to watch her, because it's great to see somebody that enthusiastic and who could sustain it for a period of three to 4 months without giving up 4 hours a day.
You're thrilled by her performance.
Yeah, I was. I think she. I love the work ethic. I love the fact that it's kind of like, it's a performance that's it's kind of like being an actor. You have to really dedicate yourself to it, or not do it at all. If you're going, you can't just flirt around with it. And she dedicated herself to it.
Someone like Morgan Freeman.
Well, we talk about the part a little bit, but what I do is I just he'll come up with suggestions. We come up, and he's got
He's a one-eyed person who lost his eye in a fight.
Lens in his eye, and we talk about little technical things, but we don't really. What I do is let actors act until not being done properly. If something's going wrong or the character's going off, then I'll start questioning it and I'll start talking about it. But I'm not one to use a lot of energy in conversation. I feel it unnerves the actors sometimes and breaks down their confidence. I don't want to do that. I like to set an atmosphere of which a person can work with the most confidence, and they have to have. And I like to have people be confident in their instincts. And a guy like Morgan Freeman has terrific instincts, because I've worked with him before, so I knew exactly kind of. And we talked about the script, so I knew exactly where he'd go. And with her, I kind of, after talking with her, I just kind of understood she would be on the right track. And once in a while, I'd work with her with tempo or something like that. I'd say, no, I want this with more. I want this to be a little more glib, these scenes or stuff like that. Just minor things, but by and large, she was right on track. They were all on track.
Who watches your performance?
Nobody. It's just there, you know. Somebody. I'm just there. I kind of go by feel. After you've been doing it for half a century, you kind of get a feel of when you're clicking on all 8 or when you're not.
50 years since you began.
51, actually.
51.
I was looking at the Screen Actors Guild card the other night. That's 51 years. That's a long time.
Here's what's amazing about you, and I want to talk about it later. They think you're doing your best work, critics. Lots of people today, your very best work. As an actor, as a director, as a filmmaker.
Well, I think it's...
And you're 74 years old.
You had to remind me. Why not? I mean, why not? As a person ages, hopefully you gain more maturity about things. You gain a different insight in things. You have more information. It may become a point where you start losing information. At this particular point, you're kind of cooking along, and I think it should be that you improve. But maybe that doesn't always follow suit. I don't know. Everybody has their time in life. Some people shine very early. I was a slow learner.
Yeah, but it's 51 years of a remarkable nuance, and I'd like to talk about that later. I want to stay with this movie first. It is you not only direct, produce, act, you wrote the score. Mm-hmm. Music informs every movie you do.
Well, I think music's very important, and the use of music, the selection of where to use it, when not to use it, these are all things that you have to, they're sort of dictated to me by the script or by the screenplay as it's unfolding. And so what I do is I started just writing some things as we were cutting.
I don't want to sound too highfalutin about this, but is there some similarity for you between jazz and making movies, especially when you get to the editing process?
Well, the only parallel I can find there between jazz and making movies would be that there is a certain improvisational, depending on who the director is. I sort of swing free and easy like that, and I add things as I go and make up things. I suppose if I went and started from scratch and made the picture again, the scenes wouldn't be exactly put together the way they are now, because that's how you felt about it at the time. And a month later, people used to get mad at Coleman Hawkins years ago because he didn't play Body and Soul like it was on the record. Well, that was only a one-time deal. He said he never played it the same twice. So that could be a parallel. But I feel there's a structure to the movie, as there's a structure to music.
That's what I was thinking about, and a sense of rhythm, and a sense of a rising action, falling action, and reaching a crescendo, and then watching it sort of...
Exactly. As the structure's very similar, but it's written out in a screenplay, as it could be written out in notes of a song you're playing, but you may interpret it different at different times in your life. I suppose if I went back and made a movie that I'd made 35, 6 years ago, like Play Misty or something, I'd approach it differently now than I would then. Maybe not as good, but I'd still approach it differently.
First movie you directed?
Yeah.
You would approach it differently simply because, by definition, you've learned and you've grown and you see the world differently and you see the characters differently.
Yeah, absolutely. You just you might just see it differently. You just add nuance that you maybe didn't think of the first time, because you don't have the information in your head at that particular time. Plus the fact that the first picture was terribly nervous, or a little more tense. The fact that it's the first one you're doing as a director, so it doesn't quite have the confidence that the later films do.
Yeah, but what's interesting about it, though, is it is one more time where you began to use strong women. I mean, you have always, this movie is a perfect example, have been from the time you watched movies, in love with the idea of strong women, and especially on screen?
Well, I think the only... we went through a period in the 60s and stuff where the strong women left the screen for a while, where they in the 40s, and the 30s and 40s, they were a tremendous presence. But then there was a time there when the strong women's roles went out and they became secondary to male camaraderie movies and what have you. But I thought it was there's something missing, because a strong female role certainly is a great catalyst for a strong male role. I don't see how that got lost. And when I grew up watching movies, we went to a lot of pictures where the whole story was based around the woman's life or adventures or what have you. Just as maybe not as often as the male roles, but pretty close to 50-50. And the actresses of that era, the Betty Davises and Joan Crawfords and Ingrid Bergmans and what have you, there was a lot of tremendous roles for these women. But and nowadays there's some indication that that's come back again. But in the 50s, 60s, it got kind of lax.
There's also in this film religion in lots of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Frankie, your character, goes to Mass every day. And then he has a conversation with the priest about how they see life. What's going on with...
Well, I think he's a guy who has doubts about he was brought up, obviously, he's brought up in that religion, Catholicism in this case, but he obviously has doubts about how he fits into it at this particular time in his life. And so he kind of has a confrontational relationship with his priest, and they just kind of he's just questioning a lot of things. He's questioning a lot of the rhetoric of the church, and for what reason? It's probably due to a lot of his own disappointments and a lot of his own doing. But somehow he has certain questions that are not resolved in his mind, and yet at some point he has to go back and rely on counsel from this priest. So it becomes an interesting dilemma for him, among a tremendous dilemma he's faced with later on.
In this movie, not only do you have a score written by you, but you also add a narrative by Morgan. Scrap provides a narrative link.
He does, yeah.
It wasn't part of the original.
Yeah, it was a part of the original screenplay.
It was always there.
Not necessarily in the
short story.
In this story, because the story has the narrative written into the description. But this had we brought the narrative out, so play it in the open, of which works in some films and sometimes doesn't. But I think it worked here.
It works because this is a story of a man who's writing a letter every day. Mm-hmm. Or every week, to his daughter, and they're all returned. Mm-hmm. And he's late 60s, early 70s, whatever he is. And then he meets this young woman. Is the relationship there, the relationship of father-daughter, or is it something else? Mentor-protege? Is it just somehow an ability to connect with another person?
Well, I think
which
he
comes out of the hunger of the pain of the daughter.
Yeah, I'm not. I think he's trying to reestablish the relationship. We don't know, in the story, we're never told exactly what the dissension was. Whether it was a bad divorce and the mother poisoned the waters, or whether somehow he had some problem with the daughter. We just know that there's been a real break in the relationship, and so we And we know that he wants to reestablish that relationship, so that there alone sets up the problem. But and obviously she wants no part of that. And who knows, in his younger life, maybe he was off training fighters, never get the attention as a young man, and somehow she just never grew to know him or love him or care about him.
But clearly it's a pain for him.
Oh, it's a pain for him, and whether it was a pain for him always, or whether it was a pain for him in later years as he looks back and thinks of what he's missed. But he's kind of grown alienated towards any kind of thing other than his friendship with Scrap, Morgan's character. But then eventually, through the charm of this young woman, he finds the daughter that he hasn't had.
One critic, David Denby, I think, found this sort of extraordinary, I mean, he thought that one of the best things about this movie was the relationship between Frankie and Scrap.
Well, I think it's a good one, because they're both sort of down and out. Scrap is a guy who had his dreams, much like the young girl, and he had his dreams of certain success and never panned out. So he's become sort of his only friend in life is this guy crusty guy who owns this gym, and so Scrap is trying to. Just to have a nice existence. He doesn't care much, doesn't have any demands for anything, and Frankie is his only friend. It's the only person he'll really confide in.
Here's what you once said about making movies. With each story, you learn something new about yourself. Once you know everything, you've had it. You're destined to be just repetitive or boring or both. I feel I learned something on every movie about actors, about storytelling, about myself. What did you learn about storytelling, about actors, about yourself?
Well, everything. Everything. You learn. The exciting thing about movie making for me is the fact that you do learn something new every picture. You learn something. I'm not trying experimental. That doesn't mean I'm doing some gymnastics with a camera and and rolling it around and dropping it off a building or something. Though I've done that, there's just some challenge to overcome. And that challenge in this particular thing was just to play the character, to play all the various elements of the character, and to have the other actors get all of the elements of their character in there. And it's always fun to watch it unfold. When you have it on a piece of paper and you say, okay, this is it. And then when they come in and say it, that's what a lot of times people joke all the time, because I come in and say, let's just start shooting. I'll say the camera, I sort of lay out a camera routine, and our crew is so good that
they've been with you for 3 decades.
They can adapt really fast, and sometimes you rehearse it. Some scenes require a lot of rehearsal. Some scenes require a lot of takes. Other scenes, but I always like to try for it at the beginning. Psychologically, it makes everybody feel like they're on key. They're part of an act that's going on. The fact that you're trying for it, they know you're not just kind of, well, we'll do 5 or 10 of these things and see if one of them puts us on the road. I don't do that. I do that so that everybody knows we're trying for it.
You want their best effort and the most real effort the first time out.
Yeah, just to see what happens. And if it doesn't go anywhere, the worst you can do is do it again. But rather than to rehearse, then do it again and again and again, doesn't appeal to me so much. So, but what I enjoy, I think, is the unfolding that first time, because an actor's always trying to make the dialogue that they say sound like it's the very first time it's ever spoken, and sometimes the very first time it's ever spoken is quite interesting,
and should be the best.
Yeah, not always, but there's no rule on it. But it's worth taking the try. The worst thing in the world, and I've had this happen, is when you do a rehearsal, and I've seen it over the years, where everything just works perfect, and you go, okay, now let's roll one of these, and nothing works, and you just sit there, and it just burns, and it gets down and down, and it loses its tempo, and it loses its enthusiasm, and everybody gets frustrated with it. So I like to make sure that we're at least trying to grab some of that film while it's happening.
When you look at all these experiences, the word that keeps coming up about your career is, I don't want to be repetitive. You know, you have been able to move beyond each genre of movie making.
Well, I've been repetitive within the genres. I've done sequels. I've done 3 sets of sequels of different films in the Western genre and the Italian
Spaghetti
Westerns, and then
the
in
Dirty Harry.
Dirty Harry, and then
Yeah, but I mean, you haven't gone back. You wouldn't go back to Dirty Harry today.
no,
You
No.
wouldn't go back to the Spaghetti Western today.
no.
You wouldn't go back to. You might go back to a Western if that was a great story.
Well, the Western genre is great, yeah, but I felt when I was doing Unforgiven in 1992 that this would probably be a great last Western for me, because the way it sort of summed everything up and
About you or about your sense of?
well, about the way the Western, the whole genre, the way the whole thing played out, and the way the West was diminishing, at least in that particular piece. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't be good for somebody else, and it may even be, if somebody else could write a equally interesting story, I would certainly entertain it. I love the genre, but I'm not searching for it. If it happens, it happens, but I wasn't searching for it when that came along, and I wasn't searching for a female boxing picture.
Yeah, but are you searching for anything?
No, I'm just good stories whenever they come. If you just read enough, or something comes along, you kind of, sometimes it falls into place. It's a luck of the draw. It's kind of a crapshoot sometimes, and you can't plan the next picture I'm going to do is going to be the story of a guy who is a pharmacist who goes insane. You can't do that because there's no
A pharmacist who goes insane.
Yeah, I mean, they would now with all the the imported drugs
exactly.
from Canada and stuff like
Right.
that, and everything went bad. But there's all kinds of stories out there, but you never know which it is. And one of these days, somebody's going to throw another story. I mean, it's totally different than anything I've ever done, and I'll probably do the same thing. I'll jump up and down and say, yeah, let me try this.
It makes you excited to
Yeah.
go outside the box.
Right.
It does.
It
It
does.
really does drive you to find what you have. There is, it seems, this sense of wanting to be tested.
Well, I don't think I'd be making films now if I was just doing repetitive. If I just stayed in like you mentioned, doing a Dirty Harry 10 or something, there'd be no reason to. There'd be no reason to do that again. I've had people suggest it. They suggest it all the time. But what am I going to do? Play a retiree? Dirty Harry's driving along with a little fifth-wheel trailer behind his car and an AARP sticker on the side of it, and all of a sudden you get him out of retirement, and he comes back and he's got a cannon the size of a howitzer or something.
Of course, he would be 104 now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So you don't, I mean, not for me. Not for me. I guess if somebody might think that would be fun, maybe 1 or 2 people, but not many.
You have said that you're on the back nine.
Playing the back nine of life.
Yes.
Sure.
So when you think about that, I mean, do you think Mystic River was last year? This year it's $1 Million Baby. I mean, that's rather remarkable to me. Do you're just waiting for somebody to present you with great ideas? Or are you in search of great ideas? Or do you say to yourself, as they said in the movie about boxing, your movie, you don't want to fight one fight too many.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Scrap did, one too many.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he lost his eye. I mean, what are you thinking about in terms of the movies? What's not done? What you want to do?
I don't know if there's one movie too many. There is maybe there is as an actor.
There was one fight too many. I mean, clearly that's true.
Yeah, there is, and you know, if you look at history of real boxers, very few of them have ever quit at the right moment.
Sure.
One or two. Who you think? I can only think
Marciano.
of Gene Tunney, Marciano.
Right.
But that's everybody else goes on too much. But that's an athletic endeavor that is very precarious after a certain age. But with the movie, you can go on. You can go on and make them, and then all of a sudden, if you start making them and they start trailing off, or they're not, or you're losing touch, or you're losing touch with stories, you're not coming up with anything interesting or appealing, then you have to rethink it all. And I'm making movies for adults. I'm not making program movies right now. I'm not making a movie for 13 to 15-year-old audience. I feel that there's too much of that going on. I think, I grew up with a wide variety of movies out there. I'd like to see that again.
Well, you have said that too many movies are made for teenagers and young adults, and therefore they become remakes of television series or sequels. Mm-hmm. That's all they're doing.
Mm-hmm. They're doing a lot of that, and I don't want to be part of that.
Are your movies becoming more intimate in the stories you want to tell?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, I think they are.
Stories of characters.
I think characters, character development, obstacles that the characters have to overcome. It's always been there in the history of writing and literature. There's always been great characters to play, but we're in a period now where everybody does, like you were saying, the sequels or the and I've done that, been there, done that.
You've been there, done a lot of things.
Yeah, don't remind me. But anyway,
well, you know, here's the thing about you. I don't think you have regrets. Do you?
Well, I think everyone has a certain regret, but you don't dwell on them. You say there's a lot of things. Let me put it this way: there's a lot of things you say. If you were doing then with the knowledge you have now, we all have that.
Of course, I know.
So you maybe handle things differently. But for the most part, I've been lucky and moving along. And
but you've made your own luck. I mean, you have made conscious decisions to grow, conscious decisions to test yourself, conscious decisions to explore comedy, to explore a whole range of things. A conscious decision early on that you wanted control.
Well, they're conscious decisions, but there's luck plays a part in it. You have to get the material has to come across you. You have to maybe to have the instincts to grab onto it when it floats by you. You don't let it float on down the river. You have to grab it. But
seize the moment.
Yeah, seize the moment. But if you don't, and I suppose there's a lot of projects that have come by me that I maybe passed on, that maybe would have been interesting in the overall scheme of things. But there's a lot of them that I didn't pass on, and so for that thing, I thank the little voice that's inside me somewhere.
If you look at this whole thing, do you see any common threads in terms of what attracts you, the kind of character that you like? Are they loners? Are they outsiders? Are they people who are looking for some kind of, in search of something?
Well, I think they are. I think they're dreamers, which I always was as a kid. I think they're...
You're a dreamer today.
Yeah, absolutely. They're people who have dreams of doing something, and when they see it, they can live the dream. When you don't see it, if you don't have the instincts to go for it, I'd say intelligence, but it's not intelligence. It's because there is a little bird speaking in the back of your brain somewhere that said, "Yeah, this is right," and that is not right. And so you have to kind of rely on it. You have to kind of go with it, go along with that.
I read something you said the other day in which you talked about As a young man, you were angry and lonely. And today, with this remarkable wife you have, Dina, you sit in the living room having a drink and you look across at her, and somehow you said, maybe in the last 3 or 4 years, not recently, but probably more powerful today than it even was then. You have a sense of peace that you didn't have earlier.
Yeah, I think so. I think in terms of that is at some point you say, at some point, when the acting profession is such an odd profession anyway, it's such a feast or famine thing. And you start out in it and you figure, I've got to, there's very few jobs and a lot of people wanting different jobs, and every time you go on an interview there's 50 people all up for the same thing, and you're sitting there thinking the odds 1 out of 50, what are the chances of me getting? So that you finally go through all this in your life, and then so when you get a brass ring, you kind of want to hang on to it, and you work incessantly. And I became obsessed with work as a young man. When things started happening for me, from television series right on through Leone and pictures, and I just worked constantly. But now at a certain point you change your priorities, and you say that family and family relationships, much like probably Frankie Dunn, the character in the picture, would like to do, are the most important things in the world. And I guess that's where I am now.
And you found some balance between love and work.
Yeah, I still love it, and Dean is very supportive of me working, and she knows it's part of my life. So it's not it's not that she's saying, "Oh yeah, go out and work and bring me some money too," you know.
Yeah, you said the other day
get
somewhere
out of here.
She wouldn't let you get away with things.
But it's just kind of it gets you out of the house. But the same token, if I have something to do with the kids or something, that'll come first priority.
I read a magazine on the way back from Texas yesterday, and there were things they were talking about, you living by a code, and I wrote this down, in which it's a wonderful lesson, and I think everybody finds it. But this is what it is, sort of rules from Clint: call your own shots. You started early, figuring that you're better off if you can call your own shots. When did you learn that?
Well, I just learned to rely on, I think what helped me the most was going and working in foreign pictures, where I was off in a foreign country working in different languages and doing all these crazy things. And I just thought that I saw different people's outlook and different opinions on how to make films, and I just thought, yeah, you have one shot at doing all this, and you have one good go at it. Why not try to at least live or die on your own decisions rather than the decisions of someone else? That doesn't mean that you don't have to work with an ensemble or work with other people, and but so that's what got me interested in directing, and I think Don Siegel encouraged me in doing that. He always said, you know, you have good instincts on things. Why don't you do it yourself, and try it yourself? And then I threw it back at him. I said, well, you try being an actor too. Come on. So we kind of would play around like that. But
you ended in fact the credits on Unforgiven. You made a special credit to Sergio Leone and Siegel. Mm-hmm. As I remember,
yeah.
You know, because they've been friends and they taught you things, and I assume
exactly.
what you've just said is what they taught you.
Exactly. Well, I learned a lot from both of them. I learned a lot from a lot of directors I've worked with, and all of those years in television. Every person you come in contact with, you can learn something if you want to.
If you're open.
If you're open to it.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes to, if you're going to be in the film thing, business or theater or whatever, where you're interpreting life or segments of life, you have to be open to people and to other people's dramas and other people's feelings in order to be able to recreate those.
Another rule was be fearless. Push the envelope. There was the Secret Service man in the line of fire was crying. There was the reformed killer receiving redemption in Unforgiven. I mean, each time these are characters pushing.
Yeah, well, even in Line of Fire, the guy's seeking redemption. And in the case of Bronco Billy, of course, it's a dreamer who's always had this dream, and it's out of sync with life. It just never quite syncs up. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's exactly interesting, different from Maggie Fitzgerald, is that there's a person who was seeking something, and at first glance it was unreal.
Yeah.
And that's why you rejected her as a trainer. And then Morgan saw some of the passion, some of the will, and knew even though she was over 30, she might be able to do it because some combinations of human quality lived in her soul.
Sure. Well, Morgan's character saw a lot of his own life in that.
In her.
In her, yeah, his own dreams, and dating back into the Bronco Billy characters, you have a guy who's a total dreamer, but that's what was the charm of it, that he dreamed and had determinations even when they took him off, and they never quite were with society as is today, and even in the case of $1 Million Baby, these people are all living on the periphery of society. We don't. A lot of people don't get a chance to meet these kind of people. There are the people like this, though, and you go down to some of the gyms, and I've done this when I was doing the film. You'd meet an awful lot of people, and you go into these gyms, and there's a lot of young kids in there, and they all have these dreams and aspirations of becoming something, and you know the odds are tremendous that it's not going to happen, but they're people with dreams. And you don't know where their life is. That's a lot of them are minorities or people who've come from, economic backgrounds that they've never had a chance, educational backgrounds where they don't have a really good shot at it. And here's this shot to be something. With Bud Schulberg. I could have been somebody, Charlie. I could have been a contender. A famous line, and they
could have been a champion.
Could have been a contender, Charlie.
Right,
And somebody wanted to be somebody and lost it, and that's the way it is. That's all there today. It's all out there. There are people like that. We just, unless you go looking for them, you don't find them. You don't see them.
I'm going to move through these because I think they're fascinating. Keep moving. That you've talked about that. And the audience are hearing these words for the first time. Keep moving. Love your job, which you clearly. None of this would have been possible if you didn't love the work.
Oh yeah, you have to. If you don't love the work, there's no sense in doing it, and it shows, and the people won't respond to you.
Speak softly. You tell an amazing story that you went to see Gerald Ford, and you noticed that the Secret Service people whispering into their ears or were always quiet, speaking so calmly and softly, and you somehow believed that maybe that's the way it ought to be on a set.
Absolutely. I could never believe these sets where they're always ringing bells before every shot. They'd have, on sound stages, they still do it at studios. They ring the bells, assistant director gets out there and yells, "Quiet, shut up, everyone," and everybody's all on edge like this. And I'm sitting there at some White House dinner years ago, and these guys are going, and I thought, how the hell can they do this? We have all this modern equipment. We're in the business with modern equipment and sound equipment. Why can't we? So we did it, and we actually shut down these things. We have radios that go off. You've heard it. You even hear it now with police officers on the street. Sometimes you hear their radios going off and everybody directing traffic. You don't hear anything on the set. They can actually talk while the scenes are going if necessary, but they don't. I mean, an assistant director may say, "We're shooting now, so don't move, don't talk."
It's got back to golf, and the more tension there is because the less well your strength, the less well your rhythm would be, less well your sense of
Yeah, absolutely. You keep it quiet. You keep it. Even the guy who comes out and does the clicker is. In the old days, the guy come out and go wham, and you're sitting there like this. Oh, okay. What was that? Now, what was I supposed to say? Oh, and you're out of this sync. These are all little things that a lot of people probably don't realize, but actors do. Actors know that, if you get into a nice, comfortable mode, then you're ready. You have no distraction. The less distractions, the better chance you have of doing a decent job.
3 more of these. Don't be predictable, which defines itself. I mean, your life is clearly that. Don't be predictable.
No, that's. I
I love
recall
this
saying
one.
all these things.
Well,
but
I mean,
might
by the
have.
God, I've got it.
I must have.
But I've got it. So the only one. Here's the next one. Find a woman. Find a woman.
Did I say singular? Woman.
Well, in your case.
I don't recall saying all these, but they're all very good.
They are good.
Whoever did
this.
Did
All
a
right.
terrific job.
So, okay, but here's the next one. Somebody made this up, but they did a good job. Learn to play a piano. I mean, music has been, in the beginning, it goes back to the previous one. In the beginning, music was a way to attract the women, right?
Well, it certainly inspires. Yeah, a lot of people get into get different incentives into
Whatever gets you there is good.
But I don't know about a piano. But I think a person could play a musical instrument. It's always great fun, a great thing, a great hobby. But if you don't have a knack for it or a feeling for it, then of course find something else. Badminton or something.
Yeah, I can't see. You ever played badminton?
Yeah.
Yeah. You are what you drive. You drive.
Well, I drive. I've got a bunch of junk. I got everything from real trash vehicles to
Helicopters.
I have a helicopter. Yeah.
Where you can get in with your sandwich and go up to the top of the mountain and commune
and
with.
I've done all that. Yeah, that's great. And it is. You're just a number in the sky. When you call in or check into airports, you're just a number in the sky. But with a helicopter, you do have the advantage that you can land anywhere. You can land in a meadow, in the Sierras or the Rockies or somewhere, and have that sandwich, take a walk, get back in, and fly off.
The last one was avoid extreme makeovers. We talked about that. You are what you are, and you look the way you do, and you've become whatever it is that shapes a man or a woman shapes you, and therefore be proud of it. This is an extraordinary movie, and for you to do all that you do in this movie is a remarkable achievement, and I don't know anybody who is not deeply, deeply moved by the ending and what you have put together. So thank you very much for sharing this hour with me.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you. I'm glad I'm very happy you enjoyed it.
Clint Eastwood for the hour. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.